Imagine you're the most powerful civilization on the planet. You have armies, engineers, scribes who document everything, military tactics, tax records, recipes, trade routes. You build monuments so vast they defy belief. You run the known world. And yet somehow, you forget to write down what your most ubiquitous objects were for. The Romans manufactured a small 12-faced bronze object for over 200 years. They made hundreds of them. They spread them across an empire that stretched from Scotland to Syria. And in all that time, with all those scribes, all those historians, all those meticulous bureaucrats, not one person ever wrote down what it was used for. Not one inscription, not one passing reference, not one drawing in a manual. Those objects, the Roman dodecahedra, sit in museum cases across Europe today. Scholars have proposed dozens of theories: surveying instruments, dice, candle holders, knitting tools for making soldiers' gloves. None of them fit all the evidence. None of them explain why the holes are different sizes. None of them explain the silence. That silence is not an anomaly. It is a pattern, one that runs from ancient Mesopotamia to 15th century Europe, from the mountains of Peru to the floor of the Pacific Ocean. Welcome to History Rebeating. Today, we're not just cataloging mysteries. We're asking the harder question: what does it mean when history's most capable civilizations hit the wall of what they could not, or chose not to, preserve? And what does that tell us about the walls we're building around our own knowledge right now? Part 1. The knowledge that vanished on purpose. In 1992, a farmer in Longyou County, China, was draining what he assumed was a waterlogged pond. Beneath the surface, he found something that had no business being there. A massive carved cavern, large enough to hold an apartment building, with precisely chiseled walls and decorated columns. As workers drained more water, more caverns emerged, 36 in total, covering 30,000 square meters. Nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock had been removed. Here is what makes this genuinely strange. There is no record of it anywhere. The Han Dynasty, which ruled during the period these caves were likely built, documented everything. They have records of canal projects, military campaigns, philosophical debates, flood management. They wrote down the price of grain. And yet, nothing about 36 monumental underground chambers requiring the coordinated labor of thousands of people over what must have been years or decades. No tools were left behind, no debris. The million cubic meters of excavated rock simply disappeared. 12,000 years earlier, on a hilltop in southern Turkey, another civilization was burying its work. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest monumental architecture on Earth. Massive T-shaped pillars weighing 20 tons, decorated with detailed carvings of lions, scorpions, and vultures, built by people who had no agriculture, no permanent settlements, no domesticated animals. Hunter-gatherers who somehow organized themselves to quarry, carve, and raise structures that wouldn't be matched in complexity for thousands of years. And then, around 8000 BCE, they filled it all in, deliberately, systematically. Organized teams moved debris to bury every structure they had built, perfectly preserving the monuments while ensuring no one would find them for 10 millennia. We don't know why. We don't know what belief system could drive a people to invest generations of labor into building something extraordinary, only to erase it with equal care. This is the first pattern. Civilizations that actively chose to erase their own knowledge, not through neglect or disaster, but through deliberate action. The question history keeps forcing us to ask is, what is worth hiding, and who gets to decide? Part 2. The knowledge that outlived its civilization. Not all lost. Knowledge was buried on purpose. Some of it was simply abandoned when the people who held it collapsed. In 1901, divers recovering artifacts from a Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera pulled up a corroded lump of bronze that no one could identify. It sat in an Athens museum for years before researchers began to understand what they were looking at: a mechanical computer, a device with more than 30 meshing bronze gears capable of predicting solar and lunar eclipses, tracking the cycle of the Olympic Games, and modeling the irregular motion of the moon, all through a hand-cranked mechanism small enough to fit in a shoebox. The engineering precision is staggering. Gear teeth were cut to tolerances of fractions of a millimeter. The device used differential gearing, a technique that wouldn't reappear in European clockmaking until the 16th century. Whoever designed it understood advanced mathematics, astronomy, and mechanical engineering at a level that simply has no parallel in the ancient world. And then that knowledge disappeared. Not because anyone buried it, because the civilization that produced it, the interconnected Greek and Hellenistic world of the Eastern Mediterranean, was gradually absorbed, disrupted, and overwritten. The same story plays out in South Asia. The Indus Valley civilization flourished for 700 years across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. They built sophisticated cities with standardized bricks, urban drainage systems, and, crucially, a writing system. Nearly 5,000 inscribed artifacts survive, and not one word has ever been deciphered. The script appears on seals, pottery, and tablets, always in short sequences that are too brief to establish grammatical patterns. No bilingual text exists, no Rosetta Stone. Around 1900 BCE, the civilization collapsed, possibly due to climate shifts disrupting the monsoon cycle, and their language went with them. 700. Years of accumulated knowledge, trade records, beliefs, and history. Gone. This is the second pattern. Knowledge doesn't just disappear when civilizations fall, it disappears when the institutional memory, the teachers, the scribes, the chain of transmission, is broken. A technology or a language can be technically preserved in artifacts for millennia and still be completely inaccessible if no one is left who understands the context. Part 3. The knowledge that power controls 30 kilometers from Xi'an in central China, a pyramid rises between 50 and 100 meters tall. It sits inside a restricted military zone. The Chinese government refused to acknowledge its existence for decades after it was first photographed by Western aviators in 1947. When satellite imagery made denial impossible, officials reclassified it as a natural hill, then as a burial mound too fragile to excavate, then as a protected heritage site requiring no outside involvement. Thermal imaging has revealed internal chambers and unusual heat signatures. 40 other pyramid-shaped mounds surround it in a region that already contains the tomb of China's first emperor, the one guarded by the terracotta army that wasn't discovered until 1974, despite being buried since 210 BCE. What's under these mounds? No one outside the Chinese government knows, and the government isn't saying. This is not a new pattern. In 1929, a map was discovered in the library of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, drawn on gazelle skin by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis in 1513. The map shows the coastline of South America with a precision that rivals modern surveys, drawn decades before detailed European exploration of the continent. Piri Reis wrote annotations claiming he compiled it from 20 older maps, including ancient charts dating back to Alexander the Great's time. No source maps have ever been found. Most academics attribute the map's anomalies to coincidence and distorted projection. But the debate itself reveals something important. The control of maps has always been the control of power. Ancient navigational knowledge was a state secret. Empires went to enormous lengths to ensure that rivals didn't know what they knew. The suppression of knowledge about the world's geography wasn't paranoia, it was strategic. Herodotus personally visited the Egyptian labyrinth in 450 BCE and called it more impressive than the pyramids. A vast structure with 3,000 rooms, half of them underground, containing the remains of kings and sacred crocodiles. Roman historians visited it centuries later. Then, around 400 CE, all references stop. The structure that multiple credible historians across 700 years described as one of the world's great wonders has never been definitively rediscovered. Ground-penetrating radar has detected underground anomalies at the likely site near Hawara. Excavation permits were denied by Egyptian authorities in 2008. The research has stalled. This is the third pattern. Institutional control of access to sites, archives, and artifacts shapes what history is allowed to know. Every era has its forbidden archaeology, and the decision about what gets excavated, published, and taught is always made by someone with an interest in a particular answer. Part 4. The pattern that connects them all. Here is what all of these mysteries, the buried temples, the lost scripts, the forbidden pyramids, the mechanical computers, the dodecahedra no one can explain, have in common. They are all evidence of a gap between what civilizations knew and what they chose or managed to preserve and transmit. That gap is not a historical curiosity. It is a recurring feature of every society that has ever existed, and it follows consistent rules. Knowledge that threatens power disappears fastest. The Longyou Caves are invisible in Han Dynasty records because someone, somewhere, decided that invisibility served a purpose. Alexander the Great's tomb has been buried under Alexandria's streets for 1,700 years, and every attempt to excavate the densely populated city above it has been impossible or blocked. Genghis Khan, the man who conquered more territory than any human being in history, ordered his burial site concealed so thoroughly that the soldiers who buried him were executed by other soldiers, who were then themselves killed. The world's most successful conqueror deliberately erased himself from the earth. Not because he had lost, because he understood that even in death, the location of power is a form of power. Knowledge that loses its institutional chain of transmission disappears silently. The Antikythera mechanism didn't vanish in a fire or a purge. It sank with a ship, and the civilization that could have built another one gradually ceased to exist. The Indus Valley script didn't get banned or burned. It simply outlived everyone who could read it, leaving behind thousands of artifacts that are perfectly preserved and completely mute. And knowledge that wasn't considered worth recording. Daily knowledge, practical knowledge, the kind of knowledge that seemed too obvious to document, vanishes without trace. No one in the Roman Empire thought it necessary to write down what dodecahedra were for, because everyone already knew. The assumption that the present always explains itself is one of the most consistent mistakes in human history. Conclusion: we are living through the largest information explosion in human history. More data is generated every day than existed in the entire world a century ago. We have satellites mapping the ocean floor, AI systems analyzing ancient texts, ground-penetrating radar finding lost cities without digging a single trench. We are, by any measure, the most knowledge-saturated civilization that has ever existed. And yet the patterns hold. Governments are still classifying sites and denying excavation permits. Institutional chains of transmission are still being broken, entire fields of expertise disappearing when universities cut funding, when master craftspeople die without apprentices, when digital platforms change their algorithms, and 30 years of accumulated knowledge becomes unsearchable. The practical knowledge of everyday life is still going unrecorded because everyone assumes it's too obvious to write down. 2,000 years from now, archaeologists may pull artifacts from our era out of the ground and stare at them in bafflement. Not because we were primitive, because we too were careless about what we preserved and deliberate about what we buried. The mysteries of the ancient world are not windows into the past. They are mirrors pointed at the present. The past is not finished. It is working. And so are we. If the patterns of history are something you want to keep tracking, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Every episode is built around connecting the dots that mainstream history misses, and I want to hear from you. Which of history's unsolved mysteries do you think would be the most world-changing if it was finally cracked? The Longyou Caves? The Antikythera mechanism's lost predecessor? Alexander's tomb? Drop it in the comments. The best answers will open the next episode. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep asking the hard questions, and never stop looking for the patterns that the mainstream misses.